Welcome back to another episode of The Power of Eight. Hello, I'm your co-host, one of your co-hosts, Pollyanna Blanco, and here back again with Jennifer. And it's so great that we're back here together today again. Jennifer, I'm excited to be here with you. And today we're going to be looking at Chapter 7 in this wonderful book that we've been doing a book club in online here by Lynne McTaggart called The Power of Eight. And today's chapter is all about thinking peace. And it's a short chapter, and yet it packs a very powerful message. I noticed that when I was diving back into it again and revisiting it. And here she was really talking about what she noticed, which I thought was very interesting, because I think we can all relate to it too when we're going through a healing process, about how when they were first holding the World sort of Peace Week experiment, there was a moment where right immediately after it, it seemed like the place that they were sending healing to in the world actually had an increase in violence. And at first, there was a sense that came over her of, oh my gosh, did we create this? And then shortly thereafter, they started to see a decrease in accidents and all kinds of things. And so what struck me in that part of the chapter was this whole idea of, I mean, one of the things she talks about is you need to replicate an experiment multiple times in order to know for sure. But what this opened up as a question is that, you know, when we're sending healing energy through the power of an intention, it's to notice what we're noticing in terms of how things play out. Because I remember I don't know if you've heard that parable before about it's neither good nor bad, it just is. So there's that, and I might be changing it a little bit, but there is a sort of part of it is there's a man, you know, riding in, they're doing a conscription, I think, for a war or something, which is suitable because this chapter was dealing with anti-violence and anti-war. And he suddenly goes off to war. And everyone said, oh, isn't that wonderful? He's been, you know, he has the opportunity to apply. Then he gets conscripted. Oh, isn't that terrible? It's going to be so difficult. Then he goes and he has an accident. Oh, isn't that terrible? But then it means that he's out of a battle. I'm kind of, you know, just making this up as I go. But it's the idea of it's neither good nor bad. It just is. And so right after the experiment, when all of that happened, how it's a normal human, compassionate, and responsible, you know, sort of response to be concerned, did I, you know, in some way have a negative impact on the world? And yet what they noticed, and I guess maybe I should actually quote it so I'm just really clear here, is that then over the weeks after the experiment, the violence had plummeted to well below the model predicted should have occurred during those weeks. So basically, it's almost like, you know, when there's something coming up for healing, it can sort of intensify and seem like things are getting worse, when actually it's just clear and getting better. And the other thing that was interesting too is how this chapter really speaks about that power of, how did she put it? Noticing that the capacity for strong emotions to create fluctuations, right? Is there anything that you want to speak to about that, Jennifer?
Yeah, you know, just to kind of go dive into this a little bit deeper with some of the things from the book. I know if people are reading it, they're probably following along with everything. But just at the beginning of the experiment, you know, they were trying to get enough people together, and there was over 15,000 people who had signed up to be a part of this thinking peace intention experiment. And I liked how she said at the beginning, you know, you sign into a website, and she had Reiki chants tracking. So there was just like Reiki music playing as people were waiting, and I could visualize and kind of feel that, because that just helps people calm and center and to come into the same space together to just be, getting ready for that experiment. And I think that's important because we, even during healing, or even if we're doing self-healing, that meditation, that quiet time, music sometimes helps, just quieting the mind. So Reiki music's great for that as well. But she talked about that, and then the experiment itself, she talked about the pages flipped over on cue. First, it revealed the target, complete with a map showing Sri Lanka. So their intention, and it's in quotes, is for peace and cooperation to be restored in the Wani region of Sri Lanka, and for all war-related violence to be reduced by at least 10%. They were very, very specific, but the pictures that were flipping over was showing the region itself, so people can visualize where they're sending the intention. And this is also what we do when we do distance healing for a person if they're in a certain location. And then it was showed a picture of 3 young boys, all arm in arm, next to the image of a beautiful waterfall. So trying to get in that perfect symbol of peace being restored. And I think it's always good to visualize how you would like for things to be when intentions are being sent out, visualizing the end. Here's our intention. We want peace and harmony in this region. Because I do think that the thoughts and the visualization of everything being good is what the focus should be, and not taking away things, but this is how the end result should be. And so, yeah, I liked how she explained all of that, how the experiment was set up. And then you were talking about, at first, it got a little bit messier in the whole region, like the first week after. And then it started to, you could really see the effects after that, and in that specific region. So there was some clearing that had to happen to make this region in more of a peaceful harmony state. And I just keep thinking about healing, like when people are going through a healing. Sometimes they go through just a little bit of a messy spot in their life before the healing, because that has to bubble up and clear before you can move forward with the healing. And that's what was coming to my mind as I was reading this. That's what I was relating it back to.
Thanks so much for sharing that, because that was really what stood out for me the most in the chapter, along with all those. I'm so glad you went into sort of more of the sort of specific details, because that contrast between the waterfall and the 3 boys linked arm in arm was so beautiful that you can almost understand how a caring human response would be, oh my goodness, like we sent such clear and positive and specific intentions, right? And I just, the reason I'm emphasizing that in our call today is that I feel like that's a really important piece in healing, is to let go of, like, we have the intention of what we're holding, and the more specific and the more embodied and the more sensations, that we can engage with the image and everything, the more amplification we give the intention. And at the same time too, and I understand this as sort of an artist's soul also, whenever I'm creating something, whether it's an artwork, a painting, a piece of writing, it's never going to outpicture exactly as I expect it to outpicture, right? That's just holding a frequency, that beautiful image of the boys in front of the waterfall, linking arms, and the emotional frequency that sustains and anchors in, and then the collective energy focusing on that through the quantum universe. And so I love what you said about, the purging out, the clearing of, the sort of the denser energies, right? Because that's the other point that I was sort of stumbling over at first when I was first mentioning it, is, it was interesting how, and I was just trying to find the exact moment because I've underlined so much in this chapter, but just how like it was also a key moment, a very pivotal, I think she used the word pivotal decision that needed to be made. And so I'm going to just see if I can find it. While I'm doing that, I don't know if you want to add anything else. I'm really on a mission to find this quote in here.
Sure. That you were talking about holding the frequency, so picturing that beautiful picture, and that is the intention, because if you have that inner smile and holding those frequencies, you can feel that in your body, and having the gratitude and the knowing and putting out those good intentions. It's all related on amplifying. You said that amplifies the intention. And I loved how you explained that, because that's exactly what we're doing with the frequencies, is amplifying it through our emotions.
Yeah, I think I found the quote here, and it adds into what you're saying, Jennifer. It's on page 78, halfway down. It says, but in the months that followed, the events played out in an even more extraordinary way. From the perspective of these 2+ years, the events during that week in September proved pivotal to the entire 25-year conflict. During that week, the Sri Lankan army had won a number of strategically important battles, which enabled them to turn around the entire course of the war. After a week in September, the army was able to take the fight to the Tigers on their own turf. The fighting turned into face-to-face combat as they mounted its ruthless offensive in the north. And then it goes into more details about how that all played out. But the key idea being that that basically, when noting that the highest weekly total for violence and the most decisive battles in the 26-month period occurred during the very intention week, it's this idea that the intention week, because I don't know if your thoughts about this and experiences with this, but sometimes when we're in that process of shifting our frequency to a higher frequency, this can trigger a lot of stuff that was sort of under the radar status quo, just kind of there. It can really bring it up to the surface too. And so it's almost like I remember one time I was driving and listening to this beautiful ascended music, thinking, oh, I'm just going to be surrounded with love and light. And it was interesting. It was because I was again, sort of like, it reminds me of this experiment where they're like, wait a second, but we had such pure intentions. And while yes, it does attract more of the positive, it can also counterintuitively sometimes, not always, sometimes trigger people around us. The light can be triggering. Our love can be triggering. And that can seem like, oh no, that's not good. That wasn't what I was, intending. And yet at the same time, it's all good. It's beyond good or bad. But it's what I'm trying to say is that it's serving the light ultimately, because it's bringing it up. And the key, at least in my own experience with that, is not to get confused by that or thrown by it into, oh no, I did something, you know what I mean? Like that I shouldn't have done that, or, into that kind of mentalization about it, to just trust the process that, because after the experiment, after that initial increase, she talks about how there was like this sustained, I think it's right here on page 76, she says, average killings fell basically to what they were in the 2 weeks prior to the intention period. However, the injury levels remained down 43% from what they were in the months before the experiment even started. So it's almost like
and I
all
think
that.
the most profound thing here is, she said, for the first time in 9 years, liberating the entire Wani district, the target of our intention. So, is that coincidental? Because I don't think so. I guess that's for the readers to decide.
It's almost like it accelerated things. It brought it to a fore, and that's the thing. Like when we say yes to something, we're also saying no to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're shifting where we put our attention. We're shifting where we put our energy. We were talking about that in the last episode too. You mentioned that. I remember that. Shared some great anecdotes. So if people haven't had a chance to catch that episode, make sure you go back and check them out, right? because it's exciting when you think about it, that, you know, when we feel like we're stuck, you know, in a stuck place, that's actually the illusion, right? You know, and not to minimize. Okay, in this case, we were talking about a war. I mean, that's very real. I don't want to be in any way insensitive or, you know, callous in saying that. But what I'm talking about is when we talked about this in one of the earlier, you know, shares, that are we focused on creative solutions, or are we focused on just, you know, the never-ending cycle of struggle and suffering? And it's our creativity that is our, you know, our cure, right? It's how do we tap into that in the midst of what seems impossible, you know, no way, no how. And, you know, it's like, even if you look back over 100 years ago and you think about something like the invention of the plane, right? And back then people would say, oh, that's impossible to be flying in the sky. That's impossible. There's no way and no how. I mean, we're not birds. We can't do that.
It still amazes me whenever I see a plane, all this metal flying in the air, you know, even today. But yeah, some of those things. I know one of the mottos I have, like in my logo for natural energy healing, is relax, shift, you were designed for more. And that's what I always come back to, is relaxing. You talked about the shifting. So whenever you make those those large shifts to a higher frequency, that sometimes things have to clear out. So that's why it could feel a little bumpy for a little while until it levels out to what your end result and your intention was. So you just have to have the faith and trust that everything's playing out as it should.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. It really is. It's that turbulence, right? Literally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where sometimes people sometimes maybe can get confused, possibly, potentially. I know there have been times in my own inner awakening journey and where I didn't understand that that was a normal part of the process, you know, and that had a little bit too much Velcro for me, and that kind of, perhaps I misunderstood it, or it's not even really about understanding it, but again, my mind made up stories about it as I was mentalized it, as opposed to just being with it and trusting the process and trusting yourself in the process. You know, that
Yeah,
the power of our
because
intention.
sometimes those shifts are new paradigm shifts.
Yes.
And the reason that it feels a little bumpy is because you're creating a new, beautiful paradigm of living for yourself. And it's new. So your old paradigm is fighting this newness because it's a little different, because you're moving your life forward in a more beautiful way. So it's just that it doesn't have to last long. It's just
Mhm.
getting over that belief system is what I feel like is how I would describe it. And after you shift frequencies a few times, and you get used to that, and you can just relax and let things go.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's true. The more that we practice, you know, and the easier it becomes, because it's like anything, right? It's like learning to drive a car. In the beginning, everything takes a lot more energy and seems a lot harder because we're having to notice things we haven't had to notice before and pay attention to all kinds of things. But then it starts to become integrated into our way of being and operating, and it becomes more seamless. And so the higher our frequency, the less hard our inner work feels and the more
Mhm.
instantaneous it becomes. And that's why we start feeling like we're traveling lighter and things happen more quickly with more ease and grace and through joy rather than through struggle. And we tap into that creative flow. And then it's in those moments where we might hit a patch of turbulence because, you know, we're here to expand and grow. Then that's when I'll go, oh yes, I know. At least like you said earlier, the smile, right? That inner smile. I recognize what's going on here. Okay, you know, and just the way, you know, like the divine parent and us sort of smiles at that inner child that's kind of shocked or surprised by what's going on. There's this sort of quiet, smile of acceptance and knowingness that this too shall pass and all is truly well, and not to, get thrown by it, and you stay grounded to it and connected.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's one of the definitions of true healing is as you grow, you step into this new way of being. So it's these frequencies as you're moving through the upward spiral in life, move on to a new frequency. And eventually you just get tuned in. And that's when things begin to flow with ease and joy.
That's a great way. I love how you talked about the upward spiral and how you get tuned in. It is like a chiropractic adjustment for the soul,
Yes.
because it's realizing that what is most real is actually the frequency that we're in. That's our perceptual filter, right? And so when it refines and it gets finer, then there's a clunkiness of the material realm doesn't have as much pull on us, right? It doesn't have as much drag. When you're thinking about hurtling through space, you don't have this like drag on the system because you're moving through, you're moving in a different way.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very good. At the very end here, it says, besides the effect on the target, was any of this also affecting the audience?
Oh,
And
that's a great
so
point.
I think that is a good lead in for next week because I have a feeling that's what that chapter is going to be about. She does say when the answers come pouring in from our participants, it was clear that some of the effects were rubbing off on them as well. And I think that just goes back to sending good intentions, sending good energy out. It always comes back to you. So, the more we heal others, the more we get healed, the more good intentions you send out for others, it all comes back to you.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to invite people to, if anything that you've heard today is resonating or sparking something in you, we both invite you to drop a comment below or even just drop an emoticon to let us know that what we're sharing is, enriching your life or affirming something positive for you. We would love to hear your feedback, and we invite you to join us next week for Chapter 8, which is the Holy Instant. And it's going to be a really interesting chat. And again, we encourage you to join us live if it's at all possible, so that way you can comment and add, we can get your questions answered. You can share your experiences because together we're better. And this is a safe space for everyone to connect with other like-hearted and like-minded souls on the inner awakening path. Because we know deep down in our heart and souls that miracles are as natural as breathing. And this is how we can help each other, support each other to continue to remember and to trust that more and more with each step forward through it all, no matter what it looks like out there or in here, to know in the deepest parts of our heart and soul that it's available to us at any moment and it's here now for us to claim. So on that
Thank you,
note,
Pollyanna. That was beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next week.